Självmordsbombaren. 1000 rupier i belöning om du går till marknaden och släpper av en bomb så att så många blir lemlästade som möjligt. Garanterat säkert och kontant om du blott överlever. Tack, sa självmordsbombaren, men jag vill ha betalt i förväg. Det från topp till tå maskerade med endast ögonvrårna knappt skönjbara kunde se så mycket dock att det utbytte sinsemellan menande en blick och gav den frivillige kandidaten sitt i förskott, allt i förskott, men dock på det villkoret han måste lyckas. Och han lovade att göra fromt sitt allra bästa. Och han var ej dummare än att han visste mycket noga var hans arbetsgivare och terrorister jämte deras chefer hade sin central och var de skulle träffas nästa gång. Han skulle ju ha en rapport att leverera. Så dit gick han när det var det rätta ögonblicket, släppte av en bomb som detonerade som en väl kraftig brakare. Och där flög många anonyma, välmaskerade, tvättäkta terrorister mer än högt i luften. Och då de var så ordentligt anonyma och maskerade så fick man aldrig veta vilka eller hur många det var. Det ingick i den ungefärliga, indefinita potten, hittills blott 650 000 offer för ett krig emellan alla emot alla i Irak, allt medan bara en vill vara där och stanna kvar, som råkar vara själva presidenten av Amerika. The suicide bomber. Your reward will be 1,000 rupees if you go ahead down to the market, letting off a bomb to make as many casualties as possible, in cash with guaranteed security, provided that you get away with it. The suicide bomber thanked them well but wanted payment in advance. The fully covered terrorists, with only eyes to let in any light, could see enough to exchange meaning glances and gave the voluntary candidate the full sum in advance, but on condition the success must be complete. He promised piously to do his very best, but was not that much of a fool not to be well informed exactly where his terrorist employers and their chiefs would meet to make their schemes next time. He would have a report to make to them. So that is where he went eventually when time was ripe, and let discreetly down their dried-up drain a bomb which went off powerfully, detonating most resoundingly and blowing many well-masked and anonymous intriguers up and maybe all the way to space with such efficiency that one could never tell how many or who any of them were, since they were so anonymous and carefully wrapped up and masked. They were included in the general statistics, so far 650,000 casualties only in a war where everyone fights everyone for nothing, while there is just one who wants to stay there and remain, who happens to be president of some states in America. Common prayer. Let us pray together, kneel together in humility to focus on our troubles and resolve our problems by combining all our forces in an effort of mobilization of our healing powers, which are no less physical than psychic. Wherefore we had better be entwined, the closer up the better, coiled up in a knot like loving snakes, to make our combination more efficient in the outflow and release of the profoundest energies which any love can fire off for only universal benefit and for our own improved development, to progress ever in the beneficial process of our universal love as prayer and unification. Hibernation. Gone is the sun and the light of the world, with a vengeance replaced by the cold Scandinavian winter of icicle beauty and permanent frost, without mercy, with dreadful slow silence, deep freezing the hearts and the minds of the Hyperboreans, replacing all life with lethargic melancholy and sleepy heaviness, with only one cure, the headache of alcoholism, while the bears only are wise enough to go really to sleep, to pass winter over in wise passive silence, the wisest of animals, while man, the craziest, just goes on working like hell, celebrating the madness of Christmas, while wisdom and love is forgotten and drenched in the sorrows of drinking depressions, while more people die than in any of the other seasons of spleen or just tiredness, suicide or common depression. But light cannot die and survives in the soul, where the sunlight is brighter than ever in heaven, if only you let the creative spirit have vent, recognition, and any attention to its never-ending potential, which is more efficient than any solarium, and that's the best way to survive winter horrors of darkness. Let out the creativeness, don't let it slow down. Go to sleep or get drowned in the dreary depression, but let creativity flow. For although all the sunlight gets niggard and spares with the intimidations and threats of starvation to death, there is nothing in heaven or earth that can check the light or seize the flow of all that which you carry around in your soul as your main source of life and of love and creation. Crisis treatment. Our minds collide in splendid piety to gracefully adorn our unity, in quiet prayer for the patient's sanity, recuperation and return to amity, from any darkness in the shadowy conformity of hospitalization's bleak passivity, of no way out from any black hole of calamity, but only the dead end of operational rigidity, the horrible experimental vulnerability of no way back, but only way out into relativity, to nothingness or somethingness, or no ability to cope with any unexpected terrible fatality. But our antennae feel the way and hold the sway against dismay and any mayday, since we know full well that nothing ever fell by fate on us to tell us anything from hell, but only from the other dell, that there was never any trial tragic which did not improve our mutual magic. Sunday Sermon. Getting drunk for nothing is never an excuse for staying sober, since you never can get drunk for nothing, since, even if there's really nothing in it, in the drunkenness you'll certainly find something to it, worth the drinking, even if it's only red wine, but of course you need some rum to get it really done. I mean, the reason for this drinking, which you need for sure, more often than not, especially if you've been sober far too long. Thus spoke the preacher from his pulpit to his congregation on a Sunday service, with the bishop listening to him most seriously, whereafter he found it convenient to comment on his parson's sermon, saying, "Only 3 small things, my friend. First, Jesus was not shot, but crucified. And second, the correct word is not cheers, but amen. And the third, you just don't go down from the pulpit sliding down the rail. But for the rest, your sermon was indeed most interesting." And the young priest, who, well aware of his most venerated bishop's visit and inspection, had prepared himself with a few glasses for the sermon, promised to himself that from now on he would more diligently study what the scriptures really said about the actual holiness of wine in celebrating great occasions. For let us not forget that Jesus on his wedding did turn water into wine, and that on the Last Supper he demonstratively advocated using wine for every sacred celebration in his name. Love expressionism. We were meant to be each other, delve into each other, to become each other, joining more than just our limbs, but coming even closer through our souls, to dwell together in the harbour of eternity, in silent intimacy, constantly increasing in intensity and tenderness, to motivate us ever more sincerely, never to let go, but keeping holding on, to our love and to each other, in the warm embrace of our hearts, to blend the blood of our spirits in a generous and ever-increasing flow, which, like a flood, will certainly continue to grow constantly more powerful, to overwhelm all sentient life, supporting it and earnestly encouraging it, to continue waxing in its glowing flow with love of ever-growing perfect irresistibility. On the table, do not worry, you will later on wake up again to a new day and a new life, beyond all worries and anxieties, with illnesses and tribulations past and left behind forever, to give way to just another life, a new life better than the former one. You will not even feel there on the table when they drill into your head to carefully remove the parasites, the growth that isn't yours nor you, but only something to get rid of, all the rubbish of your life, all that which you should have left far behind, long time ago, all that which wasn't part of you, which wasn't your life, which was not for you, while all the rest is left for you ahead, your pleasure and serenity, the happiness of your remaining life, the glowing evening of the warmest part, and maybe longest and most pleasurable part of your most precious life, which simply just is bound to be more precious now the longer you remain with us, for every day more priceless and invaluably rich and worthy. Some ingredients of love. They count to 12, those who think love's ingredients can be counted, but love is out of accountability. The ingredients are not to be summarized, nor even identified, since they are too many and far too variable to be more than faintly discerned. You cannot pin love down and analyze it, you can only live it. Once you are there, inside it, living it, you are on the right path and know something, and then it's just for you to move on, continue living it in whatever way, the easiest way being with sex, the most difficult way being without sex. But that is more of a challenge. You can even live it with sex, but without sex, if you see what I mean, which perhaps is difficult. But what I mean is simply that the love you live must be within you and at the same time completely comprise the person you love. And that is maybe the basic ingredient of love. It must be all or nothing. If you have it all, you have all to give, and then it's just to go on spending, giving, beaming, spurting forth, and generously expand your love without any end to your experience of it, since love works by constantly renewing itself, and therefore love is life never dying. The razor's edge. To wake up every morning, forced to fight the torments of your body, just to stay alive and fit for work, the daily combat just to make life bearable and tolerable and enjoyable, at least in any way, is more than just a full-time work. It is to fight for life and for survival, balancing across a tightrope blindfolded, and without safety net, the tightrope cutting deep into your feet, the famous razor's edge of life that Morm described in what is actually the introducing hippie novel about man's disorientation in this age, in this distracted world polluted by destruction by himself, while only sparse illuminated individuals feel the lostness of mankind and try to search for a solution, which they only find as individuals individually. It's a predicament with no way out, which forces you to introversion, trying to find an alternative solution by an inner road, perhaps through metaphysics, for the vital rescue and redemption of mankind, of life, of nature, of the planet and the future, to at all make any love a possibility, in desperate determination not to let it die. Den vassa eggen. Att varje morgon vakna upp till tvingad kamp med plågorna i sina lemmar, bara för att en dag till förbli vid liv och kunna arbeta. Det dagliga enviget bara för att göra livet uthärdligt och acceptabelt och i ringaste mån njutbart är långt mera än ett heltidsarbete. Det är att slåss för livet och för överlevnaden i omöjlig balansgång på en lina med förbundna ögon utan nät, där linan skär djupt in i dina fötter. Den så vassa äggen som Somerset Maugham beskrev i vad som faktiskt var den första hippieskildringen om människans desorientering i vår tid, i denna galna värld förstörda människan själv, med bara sällsynta upplysta individer, medvetna om mänsklighetens vilsenhet och sökande efter en lösning som de såsom individer bara finner individuellt. Dilemmat saknar utgång, medan blott introverteringen kan leda vidare till kanske en alternativ nödlösning genom inre, kanske metafysiska kanaler, till den nödvändiga räddningen av mänskligheten, av naturen, livet och planeten och vår framtid, för att göra kärleken alls möjlig i en desperat beslutsamhet att vägra låta den få dö. Innocence, the dwindling abyss of the loss of all self-confidence because of personal calamities and natural disasters, is not something that you can do anything about, except endure, survive and brace with that stiff upper lip. Things don't get better by the aspect of the havoc of humanity, destroying life and species, nature and environment, including any basics for the future, since there are not many wise men anymore who honestly can stake their lives in love, investing in a family concern for future troubles. So you get discouraged, overrun by the mad circus of the bolting world of greed, insanity and egoism, with sex and violence as the acceptedly sole meaning of existence. All that you can do is stand apart, detached and critical, and maybe hibernate this age of Kali, this destructive universal lunacy of dehumanization and denaturalization, by quite simply do your work, maintain your garden, write your poetry, and keep up the remaining beauty of the soul, which never can be poisoned or corrupted by anything you didn't cause yourself. J'accuse. What was the bright idea of making this world uninhabitable? Your shortcomings, capitalists and politicians, will be as grim as your short-sightedness, which turned the whole world to a mess by your voluptuousness of reptile greed, you crazy world seducers of industrialization. Putting the world's riches and its future in your pocket, making the destruction of the world your goal, which you could not bring with you anyway, and leaving nothing else behind than world pollution, poisoned future as a curse for generations. You, the greed exploiters, presidents and autocrats, oil billionaires, industrial tycoons, dictators, wildlife hunters and destroyers, and above all, military pimps, who made arms, violence and killing the world's greatest industry. The sickness of the planet cry out loud against you all, and most of all the rising oceans, dirtied by your oil, with coral reefs consumed by your pollution, the tuna fish completely disappearing even from the depths, and dolphins, whales and other breathing friendly beings of the sea caught up in drifting nets to suffocate and drift forever, testifying by their corpses to man's criminal irrationality. The seas will rise to vengeance against man, his tyranny and arrogance, his carelessness and hubris, while we thinking and responsible downtrodden rainbow warriors are the ones to suffer for the greatest crime in history, the short-sighted destruction of the world by man, the ones to remedy the mess and clean it up, for which a generation must be sacrificed, until the world perhaps can be inhabitable once again. The crying song that never dies, its melody is haunting, unforgettably lamenting and complaining ever by those ever-flowing tears that gives the music never-dying energy to go on playing, singing and lamenting, crying all souls' hearts out in a hymn that can't be silenced, but which everyone must hearken. For those tears, that heart-rending affliction, that pathetic wail and dirge of too much beauty in its melody, is just the source of life, the pain by which we all have come to life, and by which we must continue to support it, keeping up the essence of life's unbearableness, which is its never-ending and intolerable beauty. The nurse. The sweetness of your care is like the honey of a precious blossom, too unique and priceless to be picked, and far too rarely exquisite to be professional. You waste your love to make the patient feel much better than if she was well, with such attention as if she was something of a film star. And of course she is the most important person in the world, as long as she is invalid and has to be confined in bed, while you make her existence like to a consummate dream, thus building up a paradise for her in this horrible state of close to death. So good are seldom nurses, and so sweet are seldom lovers, while like this you transfer our love to a superior kind of level, raising it beyond this mortal mess of things into a higher education of more care and tenderness, for only increased good for everyone who knows you, and especially for me, your humble lover. Together, we belong to each other and cannot do without each other. That's how it works. The destiny of our love, the mutuality of our souls and its relationship like twins. The more we do without each other, the more we need each other, like a constant urge to return forever to a distant past, where we were born together in a unity of love that ever has kept warming up for this long evening of togetherness, when we shall never again depart, but only constantly return to where we started. Healing powers. There are no healing powers without pains. The more your pains in healing hurt you, the more miracles you work, the more efficient is your healing. So just let the pains consume you, and the more the better. Think of Christ and what he suffered, greatest of the healers, and all those among his followers who got those stigmata for healing, like St. Francis and the Padre Pio, all authentic, all prolific healers, but no gains, no healing powers without suffering. That is the essence of all empathy. You have to feel the sufferers' and patients' pains in order to relieve them, taking them on you, identifying with them, looking through them, going through them to thus let them ache out and dissolve. That was the method, secret, and the mystery of Edgar Cayce. If doctors were more knowledgeable in this business, many hospitals would soon be empty. The miracle. When after the day's work I stumble home to bed, dead tired and exhausted like a wounded soldier, languishing of thirst and bleeding, hungering and dying of fatigue, the only thing I need is you, my only truest love, most lovable of women in existence, all my comfort and the only cure for my consumed and outraged soul, the only nurse who can keep me alive. But you are there and will be always there, the final harbour after all the stormy seas, the star like Sirius to always guide me right, the brightest light in all the midnight sky to solace me and give me courage and renew all that which was my life, which I had thought I had completely spent. But that's the miracle, that all I need is one kind thought from you, and I will be reborn and resurrected, no death and no ruin having any power against that life and that love which gives me all I ever had to live for. No partition. You are part of me, and not just any part, but the most vital part, the most inseparable part, the part that stays with me interminably all the time, to ever keep me company even when I am alone, and what is more, the most professional, outgoing part, the part that keeps me more than just alive, the part that universally participates, to put it abstractly, in any way, in any life, to just and simply keep it up and going. More explicitly, in brief, you are myself, and I am you. And thus we keep on hanging on together, just to keep it going, flying on inseparably, now and on, as much as possible forever. Divine intimacy. We know a secret which we share in common, of the highest depth and ultimate intimacy that spells our lives with magic, of such kind that everyone must envy us, our knowledge of this intimacy with divinity, which they can only do out of their ignorance. Let them torture us with that if they so bother, since that only can become a torture to themselves. We have a higher task to overcome, the base frustrations that futility so stupidly bombard us with are only challenges to cope with on our way, to do our job without reward and without understanding, not to just survive, but to survive as souls, and thereby progress on our thorny, stormy path, to higher education, to thereby continue to instruct this wretched life of what it really is and should be. And that is our squirrel's wheel, to ever run about and reaching nowhere, without ever getting out of the entrapment of our destiny, as spiritual workers working harder, or at least as hard as any farmer, for the betterment of mankind, sacrificing all, including and especially ourselves, on the delightful, never-ending via crucis of our passion, of the nightingale's commitment to the rose. Narcissus, the true story, or what actually happened. It was just an accident, but made permanent and eternal by legend. Narcissus spoke to his beloved Echo, "Darling, you just bore me. Can't you entertain me any better than by being just my echo?" The poor nymph began to cry, since she could not defend herself, and couldn't find a better answer than, quite awkwardly, "My love, how can I please you with my poor self, since yourself are all perfection, and I can do nothing better than to imitate you in all your so perfect ways?" Narcissus sighed and said, "So you are just an imitation. What a bore you are," and looked away to find his mirrored picture in the water, and was amazed by his own beauty and how actually he was perfection only, and was hypnotized by his own apparition, being quite unable to release himself from his own stare. But Echo would not leave him, and observed that her adored lover had been caught by something in the water. "What has caught your eye? What are you staring at?" she asked. "Just look in there," Narcissus said. "I never saw such beauty in my life." The nymph saw his predicament and laughed. "But that is just yourself. It is the mirror of yourself. Have you not seen yourself before?" Narcissus answered, "No, I never found myself before." "Come, come," said Echo. "You just can't get stuck in admiration of yourself forever. There are other persons in the world." "Not as beautiful as this one. You are right. I am perfection. I don't need you any more, nor any person else, since what I am transcends all other human beings." Echo could not quite accept this. She retorted, "If I may not love you, and if you no longer can love me, at least let me then love your picture." And she dived into the water, just where he was sitting, right into his picture, which was shattered instantly. "What are you doing?" cried the young man, rising. "You can't swim!" And he jumped after her to save her. But the river god was there and waiting for them, taking his good opportunity, ensnaring them in weeds and water lilies, pulling them down under, and it so befell that they both drowned. She in the picture of her love, and he in fruitless strain to save his love, which after all he could not finally deny. Hanging by the neck between life and death, a situation difficult as such, no doubt, and what is worse, it's serious. What can we do about it when no doctors can do anything, when experts are completely at a loss, when no one does or dares do anything, when operation offers no results, when there are complications and we are left hanging knowing nothing, since there is no one to tell us anything? Our last resource is healing, which can give us no assurances and no professional or certain help. At that ideal place of rest in limbo as a sluice and easy gate to death, all we can do is pray for miracles, which certainly can happen, but are certainly in no way certain. This is hell or purgatory, of a temporary kind though, since death of all things is the last that lasts forever. It is only the most casual of moments, briefer than the slaking of a candle, and a passing only through a gate from one life to another, or, as many put it, from this mortal life of vanity to the eternal life of any meaning. We cannot accept it, though, but must hold on to her in persevering obstinacy until she recovers and returns to a much better life than heretofore, for her sake and for ours. The pain of life. You can't escape it while you live. It will increase outrageously, torrentously, continuing day by day to steadily increase the pain like some malignant cancer on the soul, which you can't even scan and even less discover or identify, since it will move about your soul in constantly increasing turmoil, chaos and disorder and disorientation, circulating as incessantly as any blood, to wax with life and age and rage, like some infernal road to hell, the most infernal of them all, since it will never bring you there, but only push you further on to it. The brighter side of this, though, is that with this pain and torture, your maturity will also grow. The pain will soften you and make you nicer, smoother and more humble and more flexible. It's called catharsis. You will learn something, develop. This most painful lesson, which we know as life, will always teach you something new to sort things out with, for another grapple with a problem and some better orientation, how to cope with it at all, survive and learn some new tricks, just how to endure it. All too short lights in the long night. The glimpses of our love are much too fickle, short and passing, and the more so in this darkness of our passing situation, of just threats and perils everywhere, in which there is no challenge against death except foolhardy optimism, the obstinacy of the will to vanquish anything that simply can't be vanquished, while we just catch glimpses of each other, forced to separation by this inexplainability of fate, which makes my love more fervent only, stressed by this adversity of destiny, to ever crueler frustration, paralysis and intoxication. There is always one way out, however, and I am quite certain that way is not death. Faith. I'll never let you go, but keep an eye on you, to keep our souls and hearts together, definitely but indefinitely, just to keep my faith, regardless of our distance, just for old acquaintances' sake. I never broke my faith to you, and never will, however hard my jealousy tried to replace me with another character that wasn't made for either me nor you. As long as we are true to ourselves, we cannot lose each other, since the truth is all we ever had, to keep to and to build whatever was worth building, not to ever be erased. Hell an introduction. It's not as bad as it sounds. Of course, it's all a fake. Hell never really did exist, and neither did the devil, although he acquired many names, like Satan, Beelzebub, the Lord of Flies, and others. Satan was originally just a local tribal idol, just like Pan or Baal or Ra, but of some Arab people, and the place called hell was the inferno of the Nordic winter, ordinary life but at its hardest. It's the human mind which has turned hell into some nightmare of imagination, and since fantasy can never be restricted, so has hell been turned into a whole mythology of most incredible, absurd and weird stuff. Just go botanizing into Dante, all reflecting the subconscious and man's less attractive sides, his mental weakness and neurotic nature. So the devil which we all must fight is just the enemy within us. Everyone himself is his worst enemy. All fears are of the unknown of our minds, and there is nothing evil but our thinking makes it so, as someone said already many 100 years ago. Since there are many sides to our imagination, there are many aspects of this hell of our invention, and no end to it. Just let it out, and it will vanish like a dream, and like all dreams, most fascinating. Grief. Inward crying without tears is more sincere than any tears can be, and much more painful, since that's why the tears don't show. They can't come out. They are forever blocked on their way out and trapped instead into a pit of bottomless despair, like a black hole of too much crying, filling an infinity with woes unutterable, of the grievous powerlessness against cruelty, injustice, tragedy, and everything that shouldn't happen, and which for that reason only seems to happen. What to do? Continue crying without tears forever. Outstaring darkness. They say the total realism is equal to the total pessimism, and although there might be some grain of truth in it, it doesn't have to be so negatively terrible. Outstaring darkness, if, when it's total, is just making the discovery of certain lights in it, and there never was a person dying without smoothly getting over it, and even smartly even with it and away with it, completely disappearing to the other side without a trace, without informing anyone, and maybe even without dying. That's what we may all discover when we die. Well, I'll not be too morose and acrid about this, but will be niggardly content with pointing out the trivial truism that all is not what it seems. Overwhelming adversity. How shall I express my love of you when there is lack of any means, except of mortal kind that never is enough? And what is worse, I am unworthy of you and of love, since I have no means to support you, and not even to support myself, while your haphazard situation is at risk and cannot stand a further strain of any kind, while I am hopelessly at bay with no means even to express my love, so tragically fettered in a cage of desperate impossibilities. But let adversity continue towering in overwhelmingness, since there is nothing that cannot be overcome by love, not even death, a powerless and foolish thing compared to facts of immortality, through which love triumphs ever gloriously, as if the strange phenomenon of immortality existed only for the sake of love. And that, I guess, is just about as close as we can get to any universal truth. Nostalgia. Why could not that divine and golden age and moment stay and just remain forever going on? It was the age of friendship, the most perfect love of innocence, when nothing was required and no knowledge was at hand nor needed, when we simply loved and were together naturally without affectations or pretensions, long before the first released erection made us blush and turn into ourselves to never be completely free again. At school there was a whole world to discover, chart, reveal and wonder at, of knowledge, botany, geography and art, a most intoxicating enterprise that made our minds delirious with happiness, revealing endless opportunities and possibilities. But that was then, the children's golden age of long ago, before the physical reality of love caused chronic introversion, before relationships had caused their first upsets and schisms, before we realized the world was mad, before we started to grow up against our will, before we parted and before you died, my best friend of my childhood. We were at the age of 10, 11 then, the best years of our lives, which have survived us with their glory, staying there behind us in eternity, while we grew up and withered, deadlocked on our course to the inevitable vanity of death. Poor people's riches. We don't need cars and swimming pools. What shall we do with monetary worries of the stock exchange and too much taxes, risky options and accursed roller coaster shares, anxieties of properties and constant keeping up of meaningless facades and artificial nonsense, when we get along so well with just our dreams, our love of beauty and of being just together, having cheap and frugal meals with friends, enjoying fresh air and some sunshine, listening to ancient proper music, reading old imperishable sacred books of inexhaustible, immeasurable merits, with some poetry occasionally, to adorn our humble life with golden fringes. I don't care about material matters, since you can't take anything of that with you, while all your true worth, grit and dreams are more imperishable than your soul, as long as you just keep them flying. Our sovereignty, pride and independence stand between us, separating us like something of our own worst enemies, originated by our own best qualities. I offer you my help, but you will not accept it, out of pride and independence and politeness, wanting to take care of everything yourself and going the official way without support, not listening to others or accepting alien advice, while I treat you the same way, not accepting any help or your advice, and keeping independently straight on my own course, steering blindly out of reach for anyone. But all this sovereignty, pride and independence is developed just to give more space to love, enlarge the possibility for its existence, and provide a larger room in the cathedral for the greatness of our hearts to roam, to give more freedom to our love, which cannot stand restrictions, and which in this world can't find enough space to expand, since love, if it is honest, craves much more than all, and never can be satisfied or have enough. Excuse my pride and independence, but it's only to give you and us a wider berth, to cultivate, expand, and let our love continue thriving in. Under the protection of the Muses. It is divine but dangerous. It keeps us from the perils of this world, but at the same time is a constant trial of our lives, our personalities, our personal validity and worth. It is a constant hardening, like that of steel in ice and water, melted down at first completely by consuming heat and fire, and then forced into a mould to reach some permanence of structure only through atrocious torture, sufferings of hell and purgatory cleansing. But the mortals cannot touch us, while we must the more assume responsibility, committing us to empathy with shortcomings of others, pledging us to share their sufferings, to ease them. So being under that protection of the Muses is no more and no less than a high responsibility, which we must prove our worth of through our labour and accountability, as thoroughly creative non-stop artists, bound to never sleep and never rest, for the commitment to our love and our ideals, and all that makes life worth all that atrocious trouble of just living. Midwinter love. I wake up in the middle of the night, and there is naught else for my eyes but you. There is nothing else that I can think of, only you, and only with sincerest love, without a smudge of anything not being perfect love, which couldn't be more flawlessly complete, and that in this exhausting time of crisis, with a cancer patient closest to us, horribly afflicted by aggressive peril of her life, for which there might be no cure else but miracles. But we believe in miracles and can do miracles, since that is all our love has done, and all the time, and ever since we met. So that is probably what our love will keep on doing. Let us live for that, no matter what will happen, come what may, whatever trials we may stumble on, but we shall never fail. Kärringen mot strömmen, skriven tillsammans med Laila Roth. Strömmen är den allmänna självdestruktiviteten, världsförgiftningen och samhällskorruptionen genom skvalkultur och tröstmedicinering, genom medicinbolagens urholkning av samhället med parasitiska miljardrekordvinster på helt legala droger, medan det är lika lönsamt med fördumningen av massorna genom massmediala monopol, reklamfinansierade förstås, som utesluter all uppbygglig, vettig, positiv information. Men allt detta vet vi alla. Men är ändå dumma nog att låta oss fortsätta bli fördummade genom skvalsamhällets destruktiva hjärntvätt, medan fler och fler får hjärntumörer av elallergi och spänningsnäten bara intensifieras, då ju fler och fler behöver bli beroende av sin mobiltrafik, då denna är det bästa medlet till att hålla stressen uppe, odla den och för folkhälsans skull accelerera den. Ty stressens fördel är ju att den hindrar folk att känna efter i hur hög grad de mår dåligt, för just vilket ändamål, att döda instinkt, insikt och intuition. Det gäller just att dränka mänskligheten i legala droger, genom verklighetsflykt, skvalkultur och ytlighet och flärd, och helst av allt så mycket oväsen som möjligt, så att finstämdhet och känslighet för skönhet och musik må dränkas i kapitalistisk vinst av skval och hjärntvätt, så att alla blir bedövade och dödade i själen, så att samhället och ordningen må triumfera över människan. Men alla dessa lögners destruktiva nonsens skiter jag fullkomligt i och vänder mig mot strömmen resolut, då jag som kärring vägrar flyta med som alla andra döda fiskar. Med bang i åminnelse. The pain of loving. Only those know anything of love that have survived it, with its pains and crucifixions, suicides and afflictions, leaving you completely ruined like an empty shell, to be left washed out on the shore, eventually to be assorted by the sea and thoroughly dissolved to ordinary sand. Supremest fools and jokers are the greatest lovers, the erotomaniacs who believe they love but don't know anything about it, those born yesterday as chronicle, drivelling idiots, lusting senselessly for what will only burn them out. You want to laugh at them, but can but pity them with sadness and regret, that you, with all the loves you had, you never could take proper care of what you now, too late, will realize was the only true one and the only one you never had. Your two faces. One of them is pure delight, the paragon of beauty, blinding like the sun, compelling you to look away, to just not let your love consume you, prematurely driving you to nuts. The other is the serious one, impenetrable in severity, forbidding rather than attractive, making you afraid to come too close, not willing to disturb. But these two different faces, almost opposite in kind, are just the opposites of life. We wear them all, like the two classical theatrical opposite masks, which never can exclude each other, although they can never be combined and are of the same person. We are all inextricable in complexity and cannot fully understand each other, nor even ourselves. All that we can do is just to love each other. The School of Love. To love and care for your integrity is paramount and primary as my concern for you, as your respectful lover, caring more for your protection than for having you. They say the gentleman is dead, that he was extirpated in the rotten age of world wars, the most difficult and dark barbaric period in history, but since man has survived, and there continue to be ladies, there will always also be new gentlemen to resurrect, since love is unavoidable as constant miracle, and the sole breeder of both ladies and their gentlemen. The gentle soft touch that true love requires craves nobility of gentlemen and subtlety of ladies, and that is the school of our love, which I am honoured to be tutored in by you. Our league a mystery. Conspiracies do usually succeed if only they are thoroughly constructive, and the schemers can be sure to get away and be the only ones aware of how they did it, like in this peculiar business going on now at the hospital about our patient. When my closest friend died now 4 years ago, he never told me what he suffered from. I was informed too late and not before he died, and the resultant shock was the more terrible, since I was well aware I could have saved him. But he never told me even though we met less than a year before. In this case, fortunately, everything is obvious and we were in time. The healing has begun already and we know what was behind it, how the hidden spiritual processes resulted in these circumstances already resulting in a better cure than anyone had hoped for. Everything, of course, can be explained by chance and luck and fortunate coincidences, but we know the truth behind the curtains, how reality was all staged from behind, by machinations only known to the initiated, taking part of the mysterious league of universal healing, which is mankind's and our planet's only hope. Love naturally. Let me love you with my heart and soul, and with what's more, that is, all that you can imagine. Yes, there are no leftovers from love. It is exactly everything or nothing. And if it is everything, it never ends and cannot be controlled or limited, but must be timelessness itself, including all infinity and all the universe and what is outside, which of course is the most interesting of all. Thus grows my love infinitely, explosively, in limitless expansion out of all control, and that quite naturally, since we are no more than natural. Russian murder. Comment on the Litvinenko murder case. It's not an ordinary execution, mafioso, just for kicks. No, it is a masterpiece of complication with a megalomaniacal exaggeration, schemed, prepared and organized for months, in the most studied way and with a vengeance, with a careful transportation of the rarest, most expensive poison in the world, and in the Russian way with vodka wobbly hands, here spilling some of it in various restaurants and airports, almost all around all Europe, in Berlin and Stockholm, among other places, just to get a poor ex-agent liquidated, with a vengeance from the firm he left, the KGB, sought out in London, England, poisoned 100 times to death, by radioactive means at the cost only of £5 million, a Russian execution in the name of loyalty. To what? To Putin or the KGB, the new autocracy, which through years already has become notorious for so many murky murders of truth-telling journalists, or to the lost cause of the fallen Russia, which throughout her history has only gone from bad to worse? We cannot tell. We can just wonder at this Russian methodology. The gentle touch of love in better worlds than this one is our realm of indefatigable unapproachability, supreme immunity against all bad vibrations, since we live only for the good ones. But in this realm of love, although extreme in subtlety, it is the more expressive, powerful, and overwhelming in its kind for being so refined and cultivated, driven hard to its extremest sensitivity, so that the faintest touch and loosest hint can be too forceful to sustain. It is a most particular responsibility to happen to be privy to these things of higher education than most ever dreamt of, could be possible or did exist. But we must never keep it for ourselves, but on the contrary, infect the world with this addiction of the higher spiritual values and life meanings, which, in fact, are more worth living for than any other matter, and the only reason for our being here at all. Love at the hospital, the forgotten Christmas celebrators. The personal is leaving, going home to celebrate with families, as far away as possible from all their patients, left in wheelchairs or in bed, alone, to manage by themselves, to do their things in nappies, quarrelling within themselves and fighting against memories, regrets and worries, in increasing darkening despair, while friends and relatives do also quarrel about how to care for them and doing nothing, except waiting for their heritage and criticizing those who really care, while all those vast hospital corridors echo from depletion in extremest emptiness, more desert than a desert, covered in a windowless and sterile claustrophobia, letting no one out except the personnel who take their holiday as far as possible from all their dying patients. Tomten på dekis. Vad begär ni av mig egentligen? Att ställa upp för en ihjälkommersialiserad jul? Att köra omkring med mina renar i en värld utan snö, där ni fördärvat hela klimatet med era utsläpp? Att tjoa och hoa och vara glad i allt ert oväsen, av dunkadunk och skval för överröstande av allt som låter bra, och acceptera att ni förvandlat julen till en ihjälprostitution av allt som var gott och vackert med julen genom er förbannade skvalreklam, som bara gjort mig till ett universellt åtlöje och ständigt mera så under de senaste 50 åren. Att vara god och glad när ni bara krigar och håller på, när ert samhälle huvudsakligen ägnar sig åt social utslagning, när julgranar knappt kan växa längre i ert försurade klimat, i alla era kalhuggna, utrotningshotade skogar, och när ni skiter i alla hospitaliserade, levande, begravda och döende, medan ni bara roar er och frossar och äter vad som helst bara för att få fisa och diarrea mera. Nej, det enda vettiga med dagens moderna julfirande är snapsen och flaskan, glöggen och vinet, att ni ändå är förnuftiga nog att bedöva er i all er misslyckade dårskap och vänta er inte några julklappar eller skorstensnedsläpp av mig. Tro inte att ni någonsin mera skall få se mig, för jag kommer inte att göra någonting annat i jul än bara sitta hemma och dricka. Life and death. Death is part of life, and life is part of death, and never the twain shall part. It is life's constant marriage that never can be separated, never subject to divorce, never dissolved, since there is no life without death, and no death without more life. We do not know what happens after death, since that is not for life to know. It's not life's business to worry about death, but we may assume that death is no more than a transient crisis of life, like all crises of life. The only mystery of death is its reticence. It keeps quiet about its secrets, and that is the only thing that makes death attractive, its only attraction, in fact, which is why it has to keep so absolutely quiet about it, or else it would not exist to make life so attractive. How can love be possible? How can love be possible in this corrupted world of filth and strife, destroyed by avarice and war for nothing, torn asunder by religions claiming all to be the only right one, while they only prove themselves all wrong, by nature raped and harrowed beyond recognition, in environmental universal human self-destruction and all else, starvation and disease, malaria and AIDS, bacteria building up resistance against antibiotics, horribly resulting in pandemics and world epidemics that cannot be stopped, and even climate changes, with the ever-growing threat of steadily increasing storms, typhoons and hurricanes, tornadoes and tsunamis, and so on, with no end to the steadily increasing misery. So how can love be possible? The question is right justified, and there can be one answer only: yes, it is not possible, and yet it happens anyway. Christmas at the almshouse. You wouldn't have expected it, but there was actual Christmas there among the paupers, bag ladies and alcoholics, drug addicts and bums and invalids, all having had their fill of simple but delicious food and entertained by the best music in the world, a classical old restaurant trio with a piano, violin and a guitar, old pensioners performing, singing and enjoying, not with very well-tuned instruments, not very accurately, but in perfect mood for sentimental melodies of that undying kind which will remain in timelessness and never will be tired of, like Isn't It Romantic, Fascination, Three Coins in the Fountain. Well, it couldn't have been better. There were even some old couples dancing. Most of these pathetic guests were stuffed with overeating and completely lost and worn out, but they all most thoroughly enjoyed it. Christmas was here found at last, in the middle of the slums among the poor and outcast. No pretensions, no hypocrisy, no luxury, no artifice, just life at its most human, and what could possibly be better ever? The dying patient's complaint. How can life be possible in such a mess of human wretchedness and wreckage, of brain surgery and tumor, stroke and cancer, all at once, and yet they all demand of me to carry on, return to life in a decrepit, ruined body, which impossibly can be restored. Complete recovery is beyond reach. Demanding the impossible is an absurdity, like this preposterous whole situation. Still, they all do mean a lot to me, and I am not completely willing to depart and leave them all behind. So I am vacillating between life and death. If they all want me to remain, my relatives and friends in such a number, I of course will humor them and stay with them, but it depends on them entirely. If they are not sufficient in their love and prayers, I have not enough of patience to remain in this invalid body, but will have to leave it for a better one, no matter how much they may love me, my poor children, relatives and friends, who after all, no doubt, will understand me if I leave them. Dark clouds. Don't let them fool you, the appearances that hide away the sun but cannot keep the sun or light away, since it is always there, and even in the darkest night. You have to look through all the darkness, pierce beyond their false blockade, and always see what's beyond and behind. like in your soul where clouds disturb the view and sometimes cause distress, anxiety, suspiciousness, and other false and passing phantom shadows. But what you think yourself is just delusions, while the light is outside in the universe and never can be shut out by the clouds. However much they gather and disturb you and the weather, since the source is always there beyond and beaming, which is all that matters, the resplendent origin, which is the universal creativity. The heart of poetry. The heart of poetry is difficult to reach, since there is almost nothing more evasive, keeping mainly abstract and impossible to pinpoint, analysis being usually a complete waste and failure, since they only manage to break poems down for nothing, the extremist sensitivity of poetry allowing no blasphemous trespassing, and being all too easily too deeply hurt. And that's how we now manage to approach the secret. That precarious touchiness is not for mortals to tread down. The soul of poetry will not allow or even risk debasing, so it has to constantly be on the run and fly away, its very spirit being purely escapist, since it cannot survive or live at all except in total freedom without limits, since its gift demands complete space, like the eagle and the condor needs their heaven without end, in order to at all be able to exist. But for what flight and purpose then needs poetry her wings? For her expression, which demands completeness or nothing at all, since poetry at heart is nothing but the highest and the purest, most refined expression of what else, if not just love. Whatever was Christmas really all about? A simple message of just love and common sense, of peace, cooperation, brotherhood and kindness, was mixed up from the beginning in a terrible dogmatic, passionate confusion for which Paul or Saul was most responsible, who without even meeting Christ took charge of all Christianity and started the first schism with Peter, separating Christendom from Jewry, starting a dogmatic church of power and intolerance, eventually evolving into that notorious autocracy of one infallible political state church, which system later made it possible to introduce the Inquisition, persecution of so-called heretics, burning anyone alive who was unlucky to have been informed against, and starting the first genocides against the Indians of South America. That church was not Christianity, and certainly not that religion which the carpenter of Nazareth once humbly introduced, of love and humbleness, of peace and brotherhood, of working all together on the art of being kind. Love is not worth it. I never was much for it. Actually, I always did refuse to enter it, since rivalry is such a beastly thing, a passion uncontrolled like that of animals, complete abandonment of reason for the sake of egoistic passion. Let the bulls fight for their cows. If other former wooers claim you as persistent lovers of the past, I will not argue with them. Let them have their way. And if the lady meets their claim, that is a risky business for her, since whenever ladies choose among their lovers, usually the best one is the lost one. There were many instances like this, when I lost all the ones I loved the most, while they succumbed to ruthlessness and blindness of the drive of egoistic passion and were wasted with their ruined lives. For me, love is more sacred than worth fighting for, since you can only love in peace, and it is better to safeguard your love alone and keep it burning in inviolable sanctuary than to risk it in debasing conflict, with intruders who don't care how much you love, if only they can have their brutal way, destroying in blind passion all that made love worth it. Missing you, passing dream impressions of surpassing reality. Really don't know how to well express it, but since you are not here, it will have to be a quiet meditation over your imagined presence in my life, in spite of all the deathbeds and concerns, in spite of all the complications, complexes and calamities of this dramatic love affair, which never seems to end its overturnings into ever more increasing unexpectedness of adventure and metaphysics, not to mention mysteries galore of this love labyrinth into a foreign exploration of the totally unknowable, unthinkable, and most improbable strange wonders of relationships impossible, that after all seem to end up in the fantastic possibility of everything all of a sudden coming true, like some phantasmic dream of ghostly unreality, the strangest wonder of them all, you being here with me in veritable presence, inside me and not forever only in my thoughts, but grown into my soul to stay there. For how long? For all eternity, as long as we don't really know each other. Beyond love, it's beyond me, this magical affair of wonder, superseding and transcending love to spite all worldly matters and reality, and conquer death by common sense, replacing egoism with altruism and healing, properly amounting to a miracle of unprecedented proportions, which make love discussions, arguments and speculations secondary and redundant matters to the primary concern of life, the right to live at all and the defense of life against stupidity and narrow-mindedness, against the foolishness of man, who even rationally thinking just builds up his limitations, while the truth remains forever far beyond him, but within his constant reach, if only he would grant himself the simple gift of grasping it. It's beyond me, but let us just let life come first, and make all personal concerns a secondary matter, even love, since it is personal, while universal love, called life, is all that matters. The inexpressibility of love. The inexpressibility of love is a dilemma, since nothing in the world can do it justice. It is like a journey that can never end, approaching constantly the goal but never reaching it, but ever dreaming about reaching it, uninterruptedly depicting and imagining its wonder in a never-endingly expanding, towering description of flamboyancy with many ornaments, but never failing in correctness and in realism. Thus does it hopelessly enthrall us all, in ever-changing and dramatic entertainment, and there is but one thing we can do about it, that is, to enjoy it. The undeniability of love. The undeniability of love is something you can't trifle with. You can't avoid it. Once you are in love, you have no choice but to go through with it. In any way, however painful and uncomfortable, it is never to be turned away, but to be stalwartly confronted with its challenges and problematic compromises, tragedies and crises, tribulations, sufferings and deaths. For love is all about the central thing of life and death. The best way just to keep it up, alive and kicking, is to concentrate on its ideals, to never get bogged down, but rather keep your nose up, breathing fresh air above water, and avoiding to get drowned in passion and infatuation. For the only danger about love is the psychosis of over-involvement, getting stranded in the storm and overwhelmed by the emotion of the unavoidable frustration, which inevitably must occur, and which in every love affair is just a test and trial to make sure that love will work, remain, continue, and survive. Seas of love. Never mind their overwhelmingness, just let them come and drown you, overturn you, knock you down and beat you. It is only healthy, it will only do you good, no matter how horrendous hells they offer you, no matter how much you will be demolished and destroyed, no matter how repetitiously you will constantly be driven over, killed, reduced to cinders and annihilated. Since love will survive and manage anyway and keep you floating just as long as you keep loving. For the wonder is that love in all its overwhelming floods will ever keep you buoyant. So just rock along, enjoy your swim, and follow down the stream, and at least I can assure you, you will definitely end up somewhere. The tortured lover's complaint. I can only be your lover if I am your only lover. What's love worth if it goes to bed with friends and leaves the lover outside howling from neglect, and hurt more deeply than the sorest heart wounds, massacred in battle just from feeling locked out and ignored? The question must arise if it is really worth the bleeding, the despair and agony, the complete traumatization, and still the faintest glimpse of the beloved's face, the shortest moment of her presence and her smile, is more than well enough to drain the ocean dry of sorrows, heal all heart wounds, and sweep all the bitterness away in just a moment's flash, and make a paradise start instantly from the beginning as if never any fall occurred. What fools are we, the lovers, who can never have enough of our folly, but must ever and again walk into walls and trains, get many times run over, lost at sea completely and repetitively, and we still will never tire of again start everything all over. Courtesy. You can never bore me, however much you try. There is something about you that never can bore anyone, since they can only love you all whatever you do to them. Your wisdom is of such a kind that makes you in a way infallible. I don't think you could ever do a wrong thing, although naturally we must all make our mistakes. Your goodness is too thorough to let any wrong come through, and that is possibly your only weakness. Others can hurt you and you can be profoundly hurt, since goodness generally lacks protection. It is there to be in constant outflow, spreading love and not demanding it, and so no one could possibly do anything but love you, which includes myself, your humble servant. Euthanasia. Since I have to die, just let me die, and make it quick, do not prolong it. I always hated sentimentalized farewells, and death is painful too, and more so than enough. So why then make it even more so by postponing just a transfer, which can't be avoided anyway? To die, to sleep, that's all, and just not waking up again, like freezing comfortably into an embalming snowdrift, going gradually to sleep quite slowly, limb by limb, like some mild anesthetic slowing down life till it stops, the softest death imaginable. Yes, if there is no returning from the definite departure, just make it quick then, do not trouble me and keep me waiting, for I will be in a hurry when I can't use this life anymore to get into the next one. Ode to a Loving Drunkard. What is left of you when all is finished, and the bottle empty, and you lie there in the gutter, vomiting your anguish and self-pity, forlorn and deserted by all living creatures that you once thought were your friends, while now you see your only friends among the dead, the only people that can never be unkind to you, the only ones who don't insult you and depress you? all those people who are only sympathetic when they sleep, while bullies rule the earth and drive it mad unto destruction, like all those responsible, demented politicians who in fact are chief accountable for this old planet's state of health, while they are those who get away with fortunes and escape the course of justice, while you lie there weeping in the gutter, with the rain downpouring on you ruthlessly and endlessly, the drunkard crying desperately all his guts out for the world and for this strayed humanity that never can get right again. But still, there must be something left. Oh yes, you still will be insane enough a fool to go on living and of loving, although no one in the world deserved it except you yourself, the undermost of underdogs, who never will stop loving any human being from your accurate perspective from the gutter. Love and pornography. Without love your life is dead, a darkness without light, a hopeless mess of no return, which makes it so important to take care of love and deal with it the right way, justly, making it remain and not just using it. Real lovers find it most upsetting to all of a sudden see each other naked, and as we all know, so did Adam and Eve after their fall. And the first thing they did was to, in consternation and alarm, put on some clothes. Most primitive ones, if not only fig leaves. So they were upset, alarmed, and almost desperate, which I find a most natural reaction, after such a paradise of love which they had had, for such a long time even. Love is more than nakedness and nude display, which isn't love but only deviations, while a simple word of kindness can be much more love than any carnal exercise. So let us concentrate on love and just forget about all those unnecessary extras, which, for all their matter, just don't matter, since love lives and dies within the spirit, while its stretching out to concretize in matter is just a departure from where it belongs and always must return to, even if it dies, to only there be able to get born again. The secret. There was never anything between us except love, but that sufficed for an eternity, and let us keep it that way. Let's remain in love and cherish it in adoration and soft kindness, without any disharmonics out of tune, and keep the melody of beauty flowing, the most beautiful in all existence, that can never reach its end or fulfillment, but ever must increase and be prolonged in beauty and in longing and in perfect understanding. Thus we shall stand forth in time against intrusions and false cords of insolence, and be a paragon of lovers, just by keeping our love our own and on its own, like some professional outstanding secret, just for masters to obtain and manage, well with care to keep the art and skill in session, unsurpassed and perfect for all future generations, to just wonder at and ask, how did they do it? Bastards are we all. Bastards are we all, since we are human. Man for his perversions is the basest animal, and actually the only one to be indecent. So what does it matter if your parents misbehaved, if you are not your father's child? If you have to take care of other children than your own, for instance your divorced man's children from a previous marriage, and so on, no one is pure, no one is sacred. All that we can do is just the best of it, since we are here and have to live and stay here. So let's just not make it even worse in messed up families by arguing about it, questioning your origin, investigate intricacies and ask upsetting questions. Bastards are we all, let's stick to that and make the best of it. Tröst för en besegrad poet. Vad spelar det för roll vem som får pris? Vad spelar tävlingar för roll? Vad spelar statistik för roll? Vad är all yttre glans, belöningar och ryktbarhet mer än den ytligaste tomhet, drömmar för dagfjärilars självförbränning, löjlig fåfänga som fjättrar en i självbedrägeriets fällor, när det enda som betyder något är att man kan skapa något som är bra och gör det. Målaren van Gogh, den bästa i sin tid, fick inte såld en enda tavla under all sin levnad, och vi känner ju väl till det fenomen som diktare i allmänhet idag får röna, ihjälrefusering genom fullständig förträngning av all kvalitet som ej är lönsam. Det är skvalsamhällets överkörning av den lilla asfaltmaskrosen som ändå lever och som kommer att fortsätta leva medan asfalten är död, och överkörningsstressen av allt viktigt bara slutligen kör över och ihjäl sig. A suggestion of the healing powers of love. The mysteries surround and overwhelm us in intoxicating wonders of the soul, in this unheard of drama of a patient subject to an extraordinary process of the utterly impossible through healing, while there are two characters in this proceeding, although we are three protagonists. One is the patient, suffering since long, and now at last in some orientation of her case, all mysteries about her sufferings resolved, while love is second in this case, of infinite resources of indefatigability, all coming out of you in tireless exertion, while the possibility that I might be your only lover, and that you have been my only love, would just be some addition in this case, a moral faint support of humble kind, that I will faithfully continue to sustain, no matter what will happen, but, as she herself maintains with admirable calmness, will turn out only for the good. The desperate solution. Like a washed-out wreck of war, you lie there in the depths of misery, disfigured and molested in dishonor, doomed in your condition to the worst of all, to stay alive, to go on living as an amputated wreck with no hope for a decent life. And yet life is worth living, since at least there is one person left to love you. And that is enough and more than a whole world of reasons to in spite of all go on, stay on, live on, and torture yourself on along the path of tribulation with no end to it, since even death is just a temporary vain release, since what comes afterwards is always even worse. Addiction. There is no addiction not worth having, or, as someone put it, there is only one addiction which includes them all, and therefore anyone is better than not having one at all. Can there be any truth in this? Oh yes, it is the whole truth, and it's truer than you can imagine. Why is this? The only real addiction is, of course, that abyss we call love, which everyone is stuck in, naturally all his life from birth until his dying day, since that's the essence and what life is all about. But love gets easily perverted, and there are perversions without number of all kinds, and they expand and constantly get worse, since that is how love works. But since perversions always come from love, that source is their excuse and sanctifies them, if they do no harm and keep within reasonability. And love will remain forever an addiction, and the first and last one, from which all addictions and perversions emanate, and are mutations and translations, variations of. So whatever your addiction, it is better just to have one than to be without, since love doth speak in many languages, and none of them is wrong. Repression. Tear away the curtains and the shadows. Let me finally discover what's behind it all. Let's go beyond the aberrations, all that stands in our way of our love, the wrong ideas, the doubts and broodings, the entanglement of 7 veils, since all that matters is beyond it all, beyond suspicion and possession, beyond all obsessiveness and beyond doubt, the naked truth of our relationship, which no one can intrude upon, and which excludes all importuning. Love can never be denied, but must the more arise and grow, and make itself more deeply felt for being put down and repressed. It cannot be controlled, for if it once is there, you have to let it be and just go down with it in its engulfing generosity more vast than any ocean. The board meeting. The board meeting went as it should, only gossip and yawnings, sloth and slowness, getting stiff and staler, every moment with increasing boredom, as if we hadn't been bored enough already with all this stalemate stagnation, constantly growing from bad to worse, as if there was anything else to do but to get lost and drop dead, which board meetings or never do. Which board meetings never do, so they infinitely continue to be board meetings. Assessment. You are too good for me and too good to be true. You are too beautiful for my unworthy humbleness and for my decrepitude, too young for my old age and far too dear for my possessing. Shall we call it off then? That is the supreme impossibility, since no divorce can separate us, and there is no lover that can tempt us to deceit. How shall we keep each other then, when circumstances always keep us separated, and we never seem to reach a settlement, since there are always others claiming you, and I can never be completely free from my commitments? So our only chance is simply to continue, as we have done all the way so far, as lovers distanced by our shyness and our oversensitiveness and our mutual fear of hurting, losing, and of trespassing each other, since we both refuse to ever lose what we so far, in spite of all, have gained. The supreme humiliation. It is fatal and for love completely unsurvivable, much more than a crisis, worse than any trauma, and it kills completely instantly but leaves you scarred for life with wounds that never heal but always ache atrociously, and you can never in your life trust anyone again completely, for it is the highest and the deepest treason, and I'm afraid it's also the most common one. The trivial case when your own love goes into bed with someone else. Although you are not touched, it hurts more deeply than could any wound, and the trauma stays for life. The first time when it happened to me, I should have been wise enough to learn to never trust my love again, but then you fall in love again, the same old trivial story is repeated, and the wounds you try to desperately cure, the hard way by repression, open up again in torments worse than ever. Although I lost everything, my pride remains, that I was always honest as a lover, and did never go to other beds except my own of faithfulness, where love was always kept impeccable, no matter how much it betrayed me. The lover, just a sketch of an old friend. Let's talk about the lover. He just goes around and takes on anything, as if his business in this life was simply to take on too much, the more the better, since his loving care is simply indefatigable, as if all his energy just went on growing and expanding with his busyness, but all his business is just love, and he knows well his business. He went wild as far too young, became subversive as a hippie, which remained his trade all through the years, at times unrecognizable with hair down to his thighs and silver earrings with all kinds of necklaces, at other times unrecognizable as an academician of complete propriety in costume, necktie, shaved and shortcut, like a bureaucrat. But he continues taking on all kinds of cases, schizophrenics, addicts, refugees and outcasts, championing their cause and giving them a lift up, while his love affairs are the best secrets in the world, since all his love is just discretion. Real life, don't give me that shallowness of ordinary entertainment, flair and superficiality, which are like farts of butterflies, as quickly vanishing as instantly forgotten. All that is only lies, what people laugh at, while real life is found among the dying, in the drama and the tragedies of fighting for one's life, which is the very highlight and the turning point of life, the highest moment of supremest truth, when death announces life's metamorphosis from this life across all borders to another beyond us, the living, while the dying only has the privilege to see beyond and enter into triumph his or her apotheosis and fulfillment of the glorious liberation from all worries left behind. Preparing her for that fantastic journey is the best thing we can do for her, adorning her departure with the warmest care of lovely memories and tender love, transcending and surpassing all she ever had. Thus can we make it certain that she will return, and even more, not even ever leaving us. Love and self-love. You cannot love unless you love yourself, and all your love is worthless if you fail to take into consideration your beloved's self-love and her right to love herself. In fact, she cannot love you unless she may also love herself. The same applies to you. The more you love yourself, the more you also can love others. And without that self-love, love is without roots and nourishment. Love works and only works when it is double, dualistic dialogue of giving and receiving, and although it only can expand by giving, its miraculous effect is this, that all your love, the more you give it, will return to you at the same time, as it is generously spent on your beloved and on others, and thus will it always double and remain impossible forever to get lost. The workaholic's dilemma. He is not incapable of love, but on the contrary is too much of a lover, feeling his responsibilities as such and trying desperately to live up to all of them, and thus is constantly an overworker, giving only, not receiving, since he feels his obligation just to love and therefore has no time for being loved. It's at the same time clinging to maintaining the initiative, like from some fear of losing it and not remaining in control, and that fear is the sickly part, which keeps him in the squirrel's wheel, imprisoned in his constant and one-sided outflow, bent on voluntarily to work himself to death. 2 directions. Our schizophrenic society offers 2 directions, and we generally take them both in opposite directions, driven both ways by the schizophrenic society, in a desperate effort to conform to it. This society, by stress and overwork, is going to extremes to drive us nuts, forcing us into the direction of introversion by over-focusing and concentration, ending up in burnt-out cases, paralysis, cancers, and brain tumors. So we find ourselves completely apathetic, as a wreck abandoned in a ward. This is, of course, insane, and thus we turn into the opposite direction, away from stress and the society, going anti-social, freaking out and dropping out, abandoning ourselves to any kind of love just to get out, escape ourselves and all that is unbearable in humdrum dreariness, routine responsibility and overwork for nothing, anything to just get out of ourselves. And the miraculous result is this, that the more we lose in this uneconomic process, the saner the results, the better off we are, the more we gain in health and clarity of mind, and the ultimate reward of this is freedom. And then we don't have any need to any more complain of this society, which as a safety catch enforces us to drop out and abandon it. The real lover has no means to express his love because of shyness and fear of getting hurt. He has no means to pay for his love because of no money, no riches, no resources, no nothing. So he dares not express it, since he knows nothing is more easily abused, more easily taken advantage of than love, and the more so, the more honest and true it is. So he just protects it by keeping it inside, to safeguard its honesty and keep it intact for the true love that never comes, since he has learned the hard way never to trust a woman, but only to love her the more for paying for his faithfulness by keeping himself buried alive, just to keep the constant slave work of his love burning, if not for else, at least for consuming himself, which he knows it's worth, keeping it alive by suffering. A compliment. There is a pain and thorn deep down inside my heart that aches for you incessantly, as if my only life was close to you and in your company, more blessed than could any others be, since you are you, and no one else can even distantly approach your character. So am I spoilt, then, to at all be known to you, or is it that I am the only one to know you deeply and enough to understand you? I must not be so presumptuous, since there never was a man who ever knew at all a woman, since that is the woman's charm and personality, to always be detached, evade, escape, transcend, surpass, and overpass man's faculties of understanding, to in fact be man's unique and single overman, as teacher, guide, and better half, since man without a woman is a continent without a sea. So let me love you now continuously and indefatigably as a faithful brother, and much more than that, your only man who really knows you and how to appreciate you more than fully. The outcast. In the bottom of despair, the outcast languishes forlorn and buried deeply in self-pity, monstrously alive the more in death. His exoneration is his excommunication, leading straight to exhumation and his resurrection. The fortune hunter. She will capture you, seduce you, and destroy you like a vampire, and as convincingly, and you will only recognize the danger and the risk by really getting caught and actually succumb and fall most willingly to the seduction, which will be most thorough once you see the trap and are locked up in it. The only thing to do next is to recognize the ruin and accept it, start again from zero, hoping not to get entrapped again, but painfully aware that you will be at risk and liable and vulnerable, and that you can never trust yourself again. The worst of all, perhaps, is this, that you can never say, "Forgive me," and she never will say that to you. The workaholic's creed. She doesn't run away from you. You always have her when you want her. She will always keep within your own control, and you cannot in any way betray her, nor can she deceive you. Faithfulness and love is all there is between you, and your intimate relationship might even pay. She never gives you any reason for some jealousy, and she never goes to bed with others. You can always, when you want, be quite alone with her, and you might even find her beautiful at times. She never runs away or paints herself too much. She never misbehaves or drinks or swears, takes dope or needs abortions, and she never scolds you. Your relationship is perfectly harmonious without quarrels, and if sometimes she can be a bore, monotonous and humdrum, that is only up to you, your own fault and responsibility. The pain of love. It hurts, and more than any operation, since there is no anesthetic, and you must be conscious all the way through that infernal Armageddon, Golgotha and Purgatory, if you get through there at all. For there was never any greater pain than that of love when it was true and had to end before you even reached it, which is usually the case when that elusive thing called love, for one time's sake, uniquely happens to be true. Lucifer's rehabilitation. There is no sweeter voice than thine, the honeyed balsam to my soul, the only medicine I need, the sweetest music in the air, the finest note that ever graced a melody, the purest song that ever warbled, higher and more lovely than a nightingale, and softer to the touch of sentiment, to the beleaguered, overwhelming sorrows of the soul. The deepest darkness of the wailing heart can only be dispersed by such a voice of tenderness, expressing purest honesty of deep affection, sending down a hopeful spark to Lucifer, with strength enough to swing him up to heaven and restore his wings in whitest glory, for such is the power of the honesty of love that it can banish hell to heaven. Release me from my love, and let me die with it exulting, in the blind release of reaching out into the light from the abysmal tunnel of what's worse than death, the trials on the way of love through all the agonies of jealousy, uncertainty, unanswerableness, suspicion, longing and misgivings, doubts, exhaustion and humiliation. But the end is always there, the reaching of one's home, the light end of the tunnel, the supreme release of all your energies, the height of beauty and of happiness, the ultimate reward of all your faithfulness, the final absolution and absorption of your soul and body into the fulfillment of the final light that is the definite reward that must await us all if we just loved at all. A parable. There once was a little boy who had a bad temper. His father gave him a bag of nails and told him that every time he lost his temper, he must hammer a nail into the back of the fence. The first day the boy had driven 37 nails into the fence. Over the next few weeks, as he learned to control his anger, the number of nails hammered daily gradually dwindled down. He discovered it was easier to hold his temper than to drive those nails into the fence. Finally, the day came when the boy didn't lose his temper at all. He told his father about it, and the father suggested that the boy now pull out one nail for each day that he was able to hold his temper. The days passed, and the young boy was finally able to tell his father that all the nails were gone. The father took his son by the hand and led him to the fence. He said, "You have done well, my son, but look at the holes in the fence. The fence will never be the same. When you say things in anger, they leave a scar just like this one. You can put a knife in a man and draw it out. It won't matter how many times you say I'm sorry, the wound is still there. A verbal wound is as bad as a physical one. Friends are very rare jewels indeed. They make you smile and encourage you to succeed. They lend an ear, they share words of praise, and they always want to open their hearts to us." Natural observation. When may I love you again? No man can live without his love. He's got to have it, and at any cost. and if he can't, he has to turn to extraordinary means, like telepathic dreams, perhaps the best of substitutes, which actually can work both ways. I mean, you're lost to her, and can you respond? No matter how much she is lost or alienated, love will always bring her back and bring you back home to it. It can never fail, but must consistently surmount and conquer all, since that's what love is for. All things must fail but love, and love alone can make all things succeed. If only they unselfishly are motivated by that basic working force of miracles that never fails and never dies, but always must remain, continue, and sustain all that which makes all life worthwhile. Hackers into poetry. Supreme stupidity and vanity, outrageous folly and pathetic miserable lunacy. You future monster, how can you get such an idea to even dare to challenge poetry, more holy than the gods, the very incarnation of longevity, the sacred word more sacred than the Bible that invented it? This is ridiculous. You just can't challenge poetry in any way, not even hypothetically. For a poet, like for instance Dante or the poet behind Shakespeare, must remain alive forever, while you can never harm in any way a single word that ever was poetically written. And even if you would succeed in such an enterprise of a preposterous deletion of all files, you cannot kill the dreams that will continue spreading poetry forever. Reflections in your hair. Let your hair grow with your generosity, imbue it with your soul and animosity, and thus increase our love in constant unity, to never cease in affluence and purity. For ours is the privilege of loving and of understanding all too well what love is all about, its working, and what it lives to tell. And that compels us to some obligation to keep out of molestation, keeping our expansion ever growing, to fulfill our overflowing of that love of yours that's in your hair, to grow forever, everywhere and here. The wasted actor. Please don't push me anymore. I am enough divided and destroyed, dispersed and lost in far too many parts, each claiming more than I can give. For acting on the stage is nothing less than spotlight prostitution, claiming all you ever had and more than that, bereaving you of all your privacy and everything that was yourself. For acting means you have to be just anyone except yourself, the only person lost to you, the only character that you must never act, while all the others must demand your flesh and bone and heart and soul, until you are an emptiness of nothing left, and all those characters and parts you acted are reduced to phantoms of pathetic memories.